Folks, welcome back to So Bad It's Good. Now, if you've been listening to this show the last year, we've been talking about Diddy, Sean, Puff Daddy, Diddy, Combs. Well, there is a new podcast presented by ABC that I think is excellent and deserves your attention. There are 3 episodes right now. It is called Bad Rap, The Case Against Diddy, and it is hosted by ABC legal correspondent and attorney Brian Buckmire, and he is our guest today. Brian, welcome to the show.
Ryan, thank you for having me, and what a great intro. I need to have you everywhere I go.
Listen, I could keep going, but we have limited time, and we got to get to a lot of stuff. And I guess the first question would be is, why are you a part of this project? What has drawn you to this case? Because this is shaping up to be one of the biggest pop culture entertainment cases of the decade.
Yeah, so as you said, I work with ABC, and I actually pitched this podcast back when Rodney Jones, or Little Rod's lawsuit came out. And the Cassie lawsuit came, and it was settled in a day. And we're like, you know what? Maybe this is going to be a floodgate situation. Maybe not. Maybe we'll see more civil lawsuits, but maybe we won't see criminal. But when Rodney Jones's lawsuit came out, I looked around to everyone and said, this looks like a federal indictment. And if someone in the Southern District of New York is not reading this and saying, maybe we should check these homes to see if there is evidence of these freak-offs, I thought that'd be crazy. So I pitched the idea. ABC Audio in 2020 and everyone else said, hey, you're not that crazy. Let's kind of look into this. And as the pieces fell into place and the indictment came about, we ran with it.
Yeah, I mean, not crazy at all. And I just want to point out to the audience, you use audio and clips of Diddy, of Cassie speaking, of all of these people in past events from the white party. You focus on that, I believe, in the first episode. You talk about Cassie's career in the second episode, and it really takes the audience through. And we have 3 more episodes left, but I also want to let the audience know, once this trial starts, which I believe is a May trial start date, you're going to be doing twice weekly episodes. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So what you're talking about is you hit the nail on the head. The great thing about this podcast and the way this case is rolled out is Sean Combs has been in the public eye for decades. And wherever you are in terms of age or interest in hip hop, you've seen him in one way, shape, or form. But now all of these bombshell allegations come out and they're talking about stuff he's accused of doing in the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. And the podcast brings us all the way back so you can kind of revisit Sean Combs, but we also juxtapose those allegations within that timeline as well. When we talk about Cassie being at an award ceremony with Sean Combs, but we didn't know at the time that 2 days before that there was that bombshell video that we now know about her being assaulted in that California hotel. So we're kind of juxtaposing it with the audio that we already have of the time, talking about the allegations, and then bringing you up to the trial. And twice a week during the trial, we're going to be doing updates of what's going on. I anticipate the trial going for at least 8 weeks, if not more. So it'll be an interesting ride.
I mean, I was so curious about the length of this trial and what's going to come out because, he's always been known to hire the best legal professionals around him. And as you point out in the podcast, he's had many incidents and run-ins with the laws through the decades. And he's always seemed to be able to kind of push that to the side and keep going. And now, he is stuck in the MDU. Is that what it is? The
MDC, the
MDC.
Metropolitan Detention Center, yes, here in Brooklyn, New York.
And the way you describe that, too, of just the outside of the building, you can tell it's a prison. You can tell this is where he is, and he's tried 4 times on bail, and he has not been able to receive bail because of past behavior and intimidating potential witnesses, which you also point out that he was potentially or allegedly using other prisoners to get messages out to his people.
Yeah. So the really cool thing about the podcast is, as you pointed out, I wear 2 hats. And in the podcast, when we are outside of MDC, ABC asked me, hey, when's the next time you're going? And I said, well, I'm going tomorrow to see my client. So this is a place that I go on an almost weekly basis, if not every other week, to talk to my clients who are incarcerated, to hear about what's going on there, to work with them on their cases. So you actually tag along for a few minutes while I go seeing one of my clients and I'm describing what's there. In terms of him trying to get out, yeah, you get to hear the podcast in terms of us reporting, but I'm also going to tell you and explain to you, okay, so let's say, Ryan, you and I are both in MDC, right? We get a code when we call our loved ones, but what Sean Combs is accused of doing is taking someone else's code to call his loved ones and try to orchestrate this kind of PR of saying like, hey, have the kids say this on Instagram and have the people say this and put this information out there. But he gets caught using someone else's code. And that was one of the arguments as to why he was denied bail. And so you don't just have someone reporting on that. You have someone who's actually explaining to you how this works because they represent people in the situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you are the perfect person. I always call it the reliable narrator, is that we need somebody that we trust to walk us through kind of a complicated a story that spans decades. And, you know, in terms of PR, there has been nobody better at times than Sean Diddy Combs in terms of PR and how he would present his image throughout the years. And it has finally taken a turn and the floodgates are kind of open. And to take us back, you know, you start the episode on episode 1 talking about the infamous white parties, and you have the Ashton Kutcher swinging across a pool, I believe, and you have the audio of him saying the kids can be here for one more hour and then they got to go because adult things are going to happen. And it really presents in retrospect a real kind of frightening image in your head, because you're like, this has been out in the open for so long, and now through Cassie, through the bravery of Cassie, we're going to really get into the details of this. Did it surprise you? I guess, does all of this surprise you that this is all happening now? Or did you think, okay, this was bound to happen sooner or later for Sean?
So I think I've gotten to the point, and just a little about my background. I was a public defender at the Legal Aid Society for about just shy of a decade. Last couple of years, I was in the homicide unit. Before being an ABC legal correspondent, I worked at Law and Crime. So I've seen enough of these stories. So I always tell people I am never surprised, but I am still shocked. I would say I'm shocked about some of the allegations, but never surprised.
Yeah, no, you also bring up, and it's so interesting just for the audience listening or watching, is that we have so many good memories with Sean Combs. You know, even you bring up Making the Band, which we watched and was like, LOL, he's making somebody go across the bridge to get cheesecake. And then you look at it through a different lens and you're like, this is potentially horrific behavior in retrospect that will be and can be used against him. But I think the reason that this is also so shocking is because there are so many good memories through his work in hip hop, through his work on television. You know, like that's why this is so shocking for a lot of us.
I think, and I don't know which one of my professors or teacher told me this, whether it was a law school professor or an English teacher and professor, but the story of like fall from grace is a story that humans have been telling for millennia. You go Greek mythology, Roman mythology, the person who reaches the pinnacle of their profession or of their success, the hero, and then all of a sudden they fall. And I think this in many ways is that story. Sean Combs, and I think I talked about it in the podcast, when he first came out, baggy pants and do-rags and whatnot, my mom was saying, "Oh, pull your pants up. Don't be singing this guy's rap lyrics or whatever." And then he became a billionaire and was selling alcohol. And my mom's like, "Why can't you be more like Mr. Combs?" And I was like, who's Mr. Combs all of a sudden? Like, what are we talking about, Mom? But he really became a person that was like Black excellence, the pinnacle of success, key to the city, Diddy Day in Miami. And then this all comes out and we're looking back on what we saw before. And we're like, did we miss some red flags?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, like these things that are sometimes obvious, but they just kind of get clouded over and we go with it. And then decades pass. I mean, the Cassie episode that I just listened to was so fascinating because here is somebody, you know, I always try to explain to the audience how hard it is to break into the industry. And Cassie gets a 10 record deal with Bad Boy Records. That is unheard of. I mean, that is such a magical moment for anybody. And then they keep not releasing her albums. And she kind of, in my opinion, falls under the spell of Diddy because how could you not? A older, more powerful man that has made so many careers, how would you not do everything that this man said?
Yeah, he was, and I think we point out in the podcast, he was a kingmaker. I know that some people be like, well, was he really? Was he not? But back then, the idea was that when he left Uptown Record and he started Bad Boy, he left, and I think we point this out in the podcast as well, he left with one of the largest rappers to this day, the Notorious B.I.G. And whether you want to debate it or not, he had some influence in his success. And then people are always thinking, hey, I could be the next one. I could be the next Mary J. Blige, the next Sade, the next Usher. I mean, the name of people he's worked with that we still listen to this day and are still influential, and he had a part of it. I think it makes absolute sense that Cassie was thinking, hey, my 10 albums are coming. They're coming. They're coming. I just got to do what he asked me to do.
There's a Bill Murray quote that I read once about, somebody said it's got to be great to be rich and famous. And he said, well, it's really great to be rich. And I always think about that in terms of like the fame aspect of it, because you have audio of Suge Knight at one of the award shows saying, hey, if you want to come to some place where, the owner's not going to put themselves in the music videos, come over to Death Row Records. And I thought it's so interesting because he really pushed for himself to be the front man, to be the person that we associate in terms of image. And that is potentially coming back to bite him in the butt in some ways. We were talking about the MDC, and you have gone there many, many times. The audience sometimes has asked me, what do you think his day-to-day life is? What does it look like in there? How much phone time does he have? Obviously, this seems like, what is the feeling you get there? Is it just overall just horrible vibes when you have to visit?
So I always tell people when I go there, I have a bit of a different purpose. I'm there representing someone, hoping to bring good news, hoping to shine a light in the very dark tunnel. And so I imagine for Sean Combs, he has a different purpose while he's there. I mean, remember, this is a guy who, if he was like, you know what, I feel like eating at my favorite restaurant in Tokyo, he's on a plane and he's going. And if he wanted to go and do that, he could do that. Now, if he wants to use the restroom in a certain way, he's got to ask for permission. And so just that whiplash, that juxtaposition is huge for him. He would probably, from my understanding, he is not in what we call gen pop or general population. He's not walking around with all the other inmates. He's in what we call segregated population. So he might be able to interact with a small amount of people, but not a large amount. We've heard reports that Sam Bankman-Fried, who also went through the federal system, talked about his interactions with Diddy. It makes sense that they would have some interaction. Again,
Luigi Mangione is in there.
Yeah, so Luigi Mangione was in segregated population when he first went, but because I know for a fact, when I go to see my client who's in general population, I see Karen Agnifilo and Luigi Mangione walk past me as I'm talking to my client. So I know that Luigi is now in Gen Pop. So same building, just different area.
Yeah. So these first 3 episodes are fantastic, but then how did you end up segmenting of like, I want to start here, and then what is to come in these next 3 episodes that's going to lead us into the trial? How did you go about as kind of a reporter of this is the story I want to tell, and this is how I want to tell this story?
So I've got to take a step back when it comes to the way in which a story is told. And I think the women and men at ABC Audio especially do a really good job of taking this crazy guy's idea and making it make sense for the audience. And I think what I was maybe thinking more broad strokes and they did more of the detail. I think what I like about this podcast is no matter where you are in this story, if you think his name is Diddy, if you think his name, I still call him Puffy. Like Diddy is hard for me, right? If you call, I don't know anyone who calls him Love. I know he changed his name to Love. I don't know anyone who does that. But I've got a 25-year-old brother who says, "Oh yeah, Diddy, the guy who like a music producer," and I think him as a rapper. So, and then my mother who thinks of him as like a gangster who turned billionaire. Wherever you are in that spectrum of knowing who he is, the podcast is meant to take you from where you are and bring you up to the trial. So the first few episodes are about his rise to fame, looking at kind of the controversy that was surrounding him and how he might have evaded it, how other people may have gotten in trouble. We're talking about like Shine and the shooting, J-Lo and the gun in the purse, but the City College stampede. But he always seems to just kind of maneuver and rebrand a different name and out of the trouble. And then we get to the episode that you saw with Cassie. And the floodgates open. And then the cases that are going to continue then talk about, okay, Cassie files a lawsuit. Other people file a lawsuit. His house gets raided. The indictment. Him trying to get out of jail. The arguments that are going to happen. At some point in time, we're going to hear about the release of some of the victims or alleged victims' names because we know there are 4 in the indictment and we believe Cassie is one. But who are the other 3?
Which, by the way, last week, Cassie, I think, made the very brave move, says, I don't want to be anonymous anymore. I'm using my name now. So she has actually added her name from what I believe, what I read, which I thought was fantastic. But it is interesting you bring up all of these past events, and these are little different pockets of pop culture through the decades that we kind of forget about. And I was researching this a couple months ago, and yeah, I was around during like the J-Lo, Sean Diddy Combs Shine Club incident, but I had kind of erased that from my memory. Like he got off, like there was no conviction on anything. Nothing happened in terms of him or even the city college basketball game where people lost their lives. And you're like, wow, these are really big charges and incidents that have happened. And yet we kind of forget about those as time moves on. And it's very interesting. Now it has this kind of cumulative effect.
Yeah, it's funny how the brain works in terms of, if I think we told most people, what do you like? And I'm 37, so I'll go with someone in their mid to late 30s. And you said, what do you know about Sean Combs? I remember him dancing with Mace in a shiny room with all white clothes. I remember Bad Boy for Life, him crip walking, and maybe this. Yeah. And then you bring up the city college, you bring up this, you're like, oh yeah. And you're like, there's a lot of red flags here. Like this. And I like that about the podcast. It kind of jogs your memory, at least for someone in their mid 30s. And I think also educates those who aren't around for it, and bring you all the way up to the trial.
Well, yeah, I mean, you bring that. I mean, it's so interesting. I have a 16-year-old nephew, and around the holidays, we were all together, and he only knows him now from freak-off parties. Like, that's going around the kids of like, oh, freak-off party. And I'm like, don't joke about that. Like, that's, but like, it's interesting how like he's known for one thing, and now to a younger set, this is what he is now known for, are these infamous freak-off parties and these detailed explanations in the courts, in the Southern District's complaint against him. Coming from a legal background, what are you expecting in this trial? I mean, this is pure speculation, but if you are representing somebody like Diddy, how do you even begin to chip away at these charges? Because it feels so rock solid in terms of the evidence, photographs, video, witnesses. It really seems like there is so much stacked against him at this point.
So I'm gonna answer those as if they are two separate questions, because you've asked the question of what do I expect and what would I do, and what I expect and what I would do are two very different things. What I expect is we're going to see the same thing out of Weinstein, out of R. Kelly, out of all of the major sexual assault cases in the past, where they simply say, she's lying. She's out for a quick buck. It was consensual. This is, and if you're listening and not seeing, I'm doing very strong air quotes. This is buyer's remorse, as is often argued in this situation. And the reason why I say we see that is because we can see that in some of the court filings. We can see that from some of these statements that the attorneys have made so far. And so far, I haven't seen that become a successful argument. What I would do, and I've kind of said this, I think you might hear a little bit on this on future episodes of the podcast, so I hope I'm not giving up too much, but you probably also heard this if I've said this on ABC. There has to be a conversation in my mind with Sean Combs where you say, some of this is on video. Some of this is clearly true. You clearly had an issue with physically assaulting women and men. You clearly had an issue with being violent. You clearly transported people across state lines. But in the same way that we attack criminal cases, because criminal cases are made up of elements. Think of it, if I said, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, has wings like a duck, then it must be a duck. A good defense attorney would say, okay, if it walks and flaps like a duck, then maybe it's a duck, but it doesn't quack like a duck. Here's this one element that doesn't fit, and that's why the definition doesn't work. And I think Sean Combs' team has to look at these charges and say, maybe we can admit that people were sexually assaulted. Maybe we can admit that there was an arson. Maybe we can admit this, but this is not a criminal enterprise. This is his business. This is his company, but it's not an enterprise that feeds freak-offs. He just has parties. He has domestic violence in the past, but he doesn't have a criminal enterprise that funnels people across state lines. It's a very technical, like kind of taking a small knife rather than a jackhammer to a case. But I think that's the only way to win this case, because I don't think arguing with a straight face that Sean Combs has never sexually assaulted or physically assaulted someone, I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, I mean, no, it is interesting. They are really saying this is a criminal enterprise, and it's going to be very interesting to hear those arguments. And obviously, he can afford the best legal defense that somebody can afford. That the cult of celebrity, though, how do you think this plays a part in these proceedings? Because a regular person that is not known, it might be a completely different way to go about like prosecuting a case like this. But we also have, I mean, you're doing a podcast on this. There's a voracious appetite from us, the listeners and viewers, that want to know every detail of this case. How do you think that affects this case overall?
So I think for defense attorneys, they are often laser focused on jail time. If I was representing you, Ryan, and you're facing a crime where you could go 10 years in prison, my focus is on making that 10 into a 0. When you get a very high profile client, though, there's also that person's reputation, because it'd be very difficult, I think, for Sean Combs to take the stand and say, yes, I am a perpetrator of sexual assault, and I own that, and I'm going to grow from it, and I'm going to learn, but I don't traffic women. And making that distinction could get the charges dismissed, but then Sean Combs would have to go out in the world and be branded a sexual predator. And for a high profile person, when the entire world hears that, that's very damaging. And that's often why you get these arguments where they have to swing for the fences, where they have to say no to everything because their reputation, their livelihood, and everything is on the line. And that's an extra added element that's difficult for people like this.
Yeah, no, definitely. Also, a detail going back to the white parties, I just thought I had never heard this detail. Is it true that at one of the white parties, he brought out the actual Declaration of Independence?
Yes. So it was loaned to him. This was a time when a lesser known senator from Illinois had made his way into becoming the first Black president of the United States. And he had the whole vote or die kind of campaign, and Diddy was really moving into politics in a way that was influential and big. And somehow he got the Declaration of Independence loaned to him, and he had his white party on the 4th of July, and that was the theme, and that's the power he had.
I mean, that little detail blew me away. I mean, just talk about the pinnacle, the top, the holding of the Declaration of Independence, and to see where we are now, it is just so boggling to the mind. Also, as we start winding down here a little bit, Cassie, this most recent episode, there's even that. I remember Cassie when she shaved the side of her head, and you have it where I believe it was Young Jock. You have audio from him saying like, yeah, like allegedly I was at a club, Puff saw some girl like that, and said, you got to do that to your hair. And then the next day she did that to her hair. Like, that's how influential anything Diddy was saying towards Cassie, that she would almost have to follow his demands.
Yeah, and a number of things. So we looked to see if there was any confirmation of that, if there were anything that Diddy or Cassie had said in response to Young Jock's commentary, and there wasn't. So we kind of covered our bases. But again, when Cassie shaved that side of her head, I remember in school a bunch of women, or I guess based on the age, young women, did the same thing. And we all thought that was cool. We're like, yo, Bad Boys is doing something that's affecting the way that we dress, the way that we cut our hair. And then now you look at it in 2025, and you're like, oh my God, did this woman who was being trafficked was forced to shave her head and then have to see the entire world think that this was some sort of fashion trend and then do it as well? And it just becomes, oh my God, oh man, I hope that's not what actually happened. Because like hindsight being 2020 and looking at back now.
And the fact that she just never got to release the albums. I mean, she was going on radio interview after radio interview asking when it was going to come out. And she was like, listen, a lot of people don't get second chances. I'm really working on this. And you really felt like how entrenched she was, because if you have like the Picasso of rap music telling you things, how are you going to argue against that? And you can see a world in which this person felt very trapped by this situation.
I mean, even her answer of saying, I think we have the audio where she says, well, I have to prove myself. I have to do this and I have to do that. And I guess in some sense, you're looking at it and saying, okay, it's Diddy making the band. We've seen him tell people to cross a bridge to go get him a sugar cookie, like the joke from the Dave Chappelle show, or go get a cheesecake or whatever. So he's just that
have
tough.
That audio in there, by the way. Yeah.
I'm not a sugar cookie getter. Yeah, like all of that, right? And at first you think like, okay, he's a tough boss. This is the time of The Apprentice when Donald Trump was saying like, you're fired. And we're like, yeah, he's just trying to make them better. And now you look at it back in 2025, you're like, proof what to what? That was your boyfriend. Like, what are you talking about?
Highly alarming, just like listening to this back to back and just hearing it all at once. And you're like, oh, yeah, it's just that thing of like, oh, we should have seen or we weren't paying attention. And there is so many good vibes attached to his music. I remember going to, was it like the 20th or 25th anniversary of Bad Boy Records concert at the Forum in Los Angeles. And he brought out everybody. Mary J. Blige was there. Even Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre came out like to like bridge East Coast, West Coast. And you're like, wow, this is such a good feeling. And you really just don't think about everything that is going on beyond, like behind the scenes. So just to remind the people as we leave here, what is he specifically being accused of? And what are they going to be arguing against specifically?
Yeah, so Sean Combs is facing 5 counts on his indictment, or 5 charges. He's facing racketeering conspiracy. You probably heard it as RICO. That's when we talk about a criminal enterprise, a group or organization of individuals who all move in unison in one way, shape, or form to funnel these freak-offs, as they call them, to traffic people, to promote prostitution, to have people have non-consensual sex in these elaborate, often allegedly videotaped sexual escapades. He also faces 2 counts of what's called sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. So it's forcing someone who is not a sex worker to have sex, oftentimes crossing state lines, and that's why you get into the federal arena. And then you have transportation for the purpose of prostitution. Pretty self-explanatory, moving someone across state lines for prostitution. Again, all to funnel these freak-offs.
And sorry, what was that?
Yeah, and then the argument that they're making now is he didn't do any of it. That they're lying, buyer's remorse. Everyone did this consensually.
And your opinion, though, all of these past cases that he's been involved with, going back to City College, can just I'm a layman, I'm not a lawyer, I don't know how the legal system really works, and except for like pop culture, can these other things be brought in to use against him in terms of he might have been intimidating witnesses back then, allegedly. He might have been doing these things. Is that able to go into this trial at all, just to establish a pattern of behavior?
Yeah. And so that's why the podcast is so wide in its breadth, because for that exact reason, it typically comes from the RICO charge. And RICO, when you talk about a criminal enterprise, let's say, Ryan, you and I are doing Girl Scout cookies, right? And in selling Girl Scout cookies, we take 50% of that and then we do something criminal. We buy marijuana with it, right? Well, criminal and non-criminal actions and even things that are done to promote the Girl Scout cookie business can all be brought in. So if you were speeding and you got caught with Girl Scout cookies in your trunk, that speeding, even though unrelated, could be considered part of the RICO, because you have to lie to the officer about why you're selling cookies. You buying wrapping paper so you can wrap the cookies, even though that's non-criminal, because the cookies go to the proceeds of the drugs that can come in. So for Sean Combs, the City College stampede, making sure that goes away so the criminal enterprise still exists, you can bring in the City College. The arson, where he's accused of blowing up Kid Cudi's car.
Oh my God, I forgot the kid. In the 3rd episode, You guys, they talk about Kid Cudi, the rapper. He literally threatened to blow up his car, and then his car mysteriously blew up.
Yeah. So that could potentially come in a RICO, because the blowing up of Kid Cudi's car is a way of controlling Cassie to say, look at the power that I have. And if you don't do X, Y, or Z, this could happen. It's not necessarily feeding into the freak-offs, but it could be a way of strengthening the criminal enterprise. So all these little rumors and whispers and stuff like that, yes, there is a potential for it to come into the case through that RICO allegation.
Do you love the law?
Oh, I love the law. I am a legal nerd. Just don't tell anyone, because I try to be as cool as possible.
That's what I was wondering, though. Is like, because I love like music and I love reality TV. And so sometimes I'm like a kid in a candy store if I go to a concert. And I wonder, when you cover these things, or if you're in a courtroom, do you still have that feeling of that thing that made you fall in love with the law, like when you were a kid to begin with? Do you still have that?
Oh, yeah. I still, at my heart, am a public defender. I love fighting for the little guy and little girl in a situation where we have the rules. And this is probably because I come from an athletic background. I played college soccer. I was a center back. And I love having the odds stacked against me and having strikers or prosecutors come at me and having nothing but my wits and a few things that I prepared for and somehow still coming out on top. And the law is probably the closest thing to that in my life right now. That and probably arguing with a 2-year-old who is a very strong arguer. If you have a toddler, you know how difficult it is to argue. Right now, it's whether or not it's a brontosaurus or a brachiosaurus, and we have some strong words.
Well, being a father is helping you be a better lawyer, a better defender in a lot of ways. Interesting.
Yeah. So, I love the law and everything that comes with it.
Okay, so guys, this podcast I am highly recommending. I'm telling you, you're going to burn through these episodes. New ones come out on Tuesday. It's called Bad Rap: The Case Against Diddy. ABC Audio is knocking it out of the park. Like this is a well-produced podcast. ABC in general lately is just killing it. I've been loving everything that they've been doing news-wise. But so in May, do we have a start date for the trial?
So jury selection is supposed to start May 5th. As of now, they're expecting opening statements to start a week after, so May 12th. And so we're going to try to get you in on, especially closer to the trial, what's the witness list? Who is going to possibly testify?
Oh,
are we going to get big names on this? We've already seen a civil lawsuit where Jay-Z was named. Then that case got dropped. Yeah. Are we going to see other big names? Then, of course,
is Kanye going to stand up there to defend him? He's going to be called?
I don't know, but we'll comb through the witness list.
Will you try to get into the actual courtroom itself?
Yes. So I will be one of the people in the courtroom because this is federal court, so we can't put cameras in there. It's just the rules. Yeah. And so we have Aaron Katursky who's going to be in there. I'm going to be there as well, and we're going to try to get you the best color of the court. What are people looking like when they say this? Yeah. What are the gasps? What are the this? What are the that? We're trying to bring you into the court as best as possible.
Well, color me subscribed. I want everybody out there to subscribe to this podcast, and I also want you to rate it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You might think, oh, ABC News, they don't need reviews. They're a huge entity. No, every podcast needs to be discovered, and reviews are the way to do that. So it's a real easy, quick way. Just tap your finger on that 5 stars, subscribe to this podcast, and I will be listening to every episode, man. And I hope at some point, maybe through the trial or afterwards, I can speak with you again about your reactions thus far. But Brian Buckmire, this has been so awesome to talk to you. Thanks, man.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thank you. And I will be back when you need me. Pleasure being here.